Off the back of their excitement from their last two albums, the Murder Capital are back with their third album, Blindness. I caught up with James and Gabriel to talk about the lyrical content, how it was produced, and what fans can expect. Guys, James, Gabriel, Murder Capital, welcome to the interview. How does it feel to be sort of embarking now on this third album of yours?
Feels good, man. Yeah, it feels good. It feels better than ever, really. You know, it always kind of feels like the first time in a way. But there's something that feels very untethered about this record for us. You know, it's kind of music. I'll speak for myself anyway, but the music that I've always wanted to make in this band, I think. Yeah.
Would you agree with that, Gabriel?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's probably the most cohesive bit of work that we've done. Like, I feel like we've all rowed in the same direction in this record. And yeah, it's just so visceral.
On horseback.
On horseback, yeah. On 5 different horses or the same horse.
The same horse. Mega horse.
All the reins there. Yeah.
You said it kind of feels, it always feels like the first time, I guess, was what you were alluding to, but the third album is kind of an interesting album in any artist's career, because a lot of the time I find as a listener, artists have definitely sort of began to found their voice on that third record, and that's something you clearly say that has happened in your case.
Yeah, that's very fair to say, man. Like I sort of remember once we were like recording this record in LA with John. Again, we worked with John Congleton on the last record as well. There was a point where I rang home and I was chatting to my girlfriend on the phone, like just saying, I feel like we're going to be a sort of a real band now, you know? And I would say that to a couple of people and they're kind of scoff because, you know, we made 2 records, toured around the world and stuff like that. But there's something about this one that feels, I don't know, you know, we're here with you walking into frame and everything.
Yeah.
Things are going well.
Well, do you think that's sonically or maybe more process driven? So how you recorded it in LA with John, or is it something in the sound that makes you feel that way?
I suppose, yeah, it's definitely in a process. With regards to process, it's like there's a self-assuredness, you know, we know what we're fucking doing now. So it kind of felt that way. We wrote this a lot faster than the last one. I think we wrote the last one over, you know, a year and a half, something like that. And like, we wrote this one, I suppose, there's a good bit of writing done alone, you know, but like together we wrote this one in about 6 weeks. So it was like much more, you know, in flow, I suppose, you know.
Yeah. Well, I've read that it was a kind of a quick turnaround from tour. I will get into that. But first I just want to go back. I don't want to dwell on it too long because no one likes to talk about it, but COVID was a cloud that hung over your second album a little bit. So how did that sort of drive any maybe resentment or frustration that you then put into the recording of this record?
I think we had to like claw everything back from the first record in a way. Like the war story that we have is that we were literally on the plane or on the escalator in Dublin Airport heading for our first American tour, and as we were on the escalator we just looked at our phones and Coachella was cancelled. So like we were going into this tour that was like already falling apart. It was like, do we even get on the plane? And like 2 days in, then we had to come home. So there were so many opportunities that we had gotten, like our first Glastonbury, our first Coachella, playing KXP was a big one for all of us as well. And yeah, just like overnight it was all gone. And yeah, like momentum in a band's growth is like a huge thing, and obviously everybody's priorities changed overnight as well, you know. So everything that we had to, like all of our fucking dreams, like we had to work back. But we managed to do that. It just took a bit more time.
So I actually saw you at that Glastonbury show that you
no way.
eventually played. I think it was 22 or 23.
23, yeah.
Quite literally eventually played because we were about 20 minutes late to stage.
But when you came out, there was like, there's an energy to your performance that I guess it's probably naturally there because you're energetic performers, but was probably informed a little bit by that experience you'd had, I guess. Things that can take away from you.
Yeah.
Because we have that nightmare of like going on stage and like you can't plug in your guitar, it's like not tuned, or there's yeah, just like nothing's working on stage. But once we got to that Glastonbury stage, like literally nothing was working. Like the whole fucking power went.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was one of those moments that were just like, after getting it back, like, is it still not gonna happen? But it made the show even more literally electric once electric came back. But that was an amazing thing about Glastonbury, is like in any other festival, like they have to cut your time slot, but they were so kind to us, they're like, not play it. Like they understood the history of us as well, like how much it meant to us. So yeah.
They probably saw the life draining from our eye. Like, say, this happened to me.
Another thing going wrong. Well, I'm glad they did, because it's an amazing set that you played. But then that kind of bled into a tour that, from what I've read, didn't long finish before you went into the studio or the rehearsal space for this third record, Blindness. Can you tell me a little bit about how that time framed up?
It was a day in between. Yeah. We played. We finished that tour. It was called the Cleanse Reflection Tour. We finished that in Dingle at Other Voices in Ireland, and yeah, we played the Saturday, and we went into the studio in Dublin, Temple Lane, on the Monday, and that was like, although I don't like to compare writing trips for their for the sort of music that comes out of them, because they're all kind of worthwhile in their own way. But that was a lot of tunes on this record came out of those 2 weeks in Dublin.
Yeah, it's an obvious trope, but there's an energy in the live performance that obviously carried into the recording of those songs, specifically the writing, I guess, in terms of how you sort of portrayed the energy. Is that fair to say?
I think so, man. Yeah, we're sort of like, this record is different for us because everyone's living in different cities now, like Gabe's in Paris, G's in Berlin, 3 of us in London, and spent some time in Ireland as well. And that kind of means that, most importantly, it kind of means that everyone's like happy to be living where they're living, and you're not kind of like all bundled into one city that like half the lads like and half the lads don't like, so it just reframed our way of working, and we would meet up. We did 2 weeks in Dublin, took a little break then, and we did 2 weeks in Berlin, 2 weeks in London or whatever, so it was kind of just moving around the houses, and you'd know that the writing trip was coming, so when you're there for whatever, in those 2 weeks we probably do 10 or 11 days in studio, and you're just kind of locked into that.
How did John Congleton facilitate that with you guys, as both a creative but also someone who's kind of bringing in the influences of people who are living in different cities?
John facilitates. Yeah, I'm trying to put those things here.
Well, you can tell me how maybe he doesn't facilitate.
No, he very much does. Like, it's just John is such a sort of an enigma in many ways and ways of thinking. But I think like when we made our second record with him, we were in Le Fret in Paris, and towards the end of making Gigi, he was like, "This has been great. This has been, I've really enjoyed this, but I'm looking forward to making the real one with you next time."
Right.
Yeah. Which is either a sort of a sales pitch, like very clever sort of psychological sales pitch to work with us again, or it is what it became, where we kind of bought into it. We were like, yeah, you know what? He spent so much time untangling a lot of our, I feel like being in a band is just a web of shit, and it can be like really good, and it can also just be very, you don't actually know. When someone comes in and looks at your process and they can see these idiosyncrasies within it, like he saw those very clearly, and I think, going into this record, then having demoed Gigi to bits, we worked on that record and it was so cinematic and expansive and indulgent. It was his idea to not do any demos on Blindness, and we just threw the phone down the middle of the floor and just played, So we went to the studio then. All these songs were just like these little frazzled phone recordings that kind of we loved, and could become anything,
Yeah, because I read that you said in relation to the second record, Blindness feels a little bit like you've kind of escaped the sense of claustrophobia. So from judging by what you just said there, I guess that he kind of enabled you to free up that that feeling and sort of become more maybe vulnerable, I guess.
For sure. It's he sort of took the shackles off our ankles and fashioned them into a necklace.
Yeah. Okay. But it's an interesting like metaphor you use there, because when you provide context and say that there, it makes complete sense. But for someone who doesn't know the ins and outs of the recording process of both records, if you were to play the first track of this album, there's a sense of like sonic claustrophobia within that track.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you kind of combine those two feelings of a sonic claustrophobia but also feeling more free?
That tune feels like that. Yeah, Moonshot's been around for a while. Like, I wrote that one a couple of years ago. Like, I remember working on it a little bit in the fret, not was it in mind for the second record, but just working away on it. And it was kind of more of like an Elliott Smith kind of inspired tune. And the reason why that tune sounds the way it does is because there was about maybe an hour left in the studio in LA before the end of the process, and Gabe was just coming out of a serious bout of food poisoning that he had for
I don't remember part of it.
Really? Yeah. Do you remember the source of the food poisoning at least?
Green.
very well.
Yeah.
Very well. So we
I'm just like cooked up minced meat. That was it. I'm responsible for it. I try to save money for like
the only meal he cooked either.
the only meal, and then I give myself food poisoning straight away. Yeah.
Look, based on that, let's talk about it though. Minced beef, right? This is proper like some Instagram shit he saw basically, right? Minced beef, and then cracked a couple eggs into the minced beef and just cooked that up and stirred it up, right? And there he was at his food, and I walked over to him and I was like, man,
yeah,
it looks like dog's food. Like,
yeah. There's a clear like protein
stuck in the fridge before it even cooled down.
Yeah,
that was
In Bammy.
yes.
doing himself to blame.
We looked at it like, and we were like, Katie would not allow me to eat this. Like, my therapist would like literally not allow me to put it in.
Somehow.
So it was it. Well, lost weight. Well, I lost so much weight, which was actually a good thing at the end of being in America, because like we were eating like bare donuts. But I don't remember harding that track like, and I definitely had like an unbelievably severe pain in my stomach when I was doing it. Yeah, so like that is probably what part of the bass line's like vitriol is.
It's crazy to think that's the backstory, because it is like a very frenetic, rhythmic song to play it.
But even more so, it was like, I think myself and Dee really wanted to record it. Gabe was down to sort of just play bass at that point. To
Keep time.
Yeah, he'd just been like whatever in bed for like 5 days of like a 3-week sessions.
Yeah.
It was tough. Like Pump, I think, didn't really believe in it, or wasn't too pushed on it, and kind of there was literally an hour left. Like, so everyone was burnt as well. Like Irv was specifically very burnt at that moment, and just kind of he had given everything he could to the recording, but so it was kind of like really just had to draw it out of them. And I went in, I fixed a few lyrics in it last second, and Irv was just sitting there with his guitar, and he was like, I've got nothing, and I was just like, man, just whatever, like, whatever frustrations you have from this process, which there are many in recording a record, take them out. And there's just amazing footage, and obviously it's there on the record, of him basically just destroying his guitar for about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And so there's no real like riff or lead line melody in that tune. It's just these kind of like splashes of aggression and noise and color.
It's kind of I guess a sense of catharsis at the end of what sound got quite exhausted in the recording process.
It was nice as well. We only played that song together for the first time the other day.
Yeah.
Because it was literally done, and we walked out of the studio, and that was it. And we didn't take home any desk mixes or anything like that. So we only heard the album like 5 weeks after recording or something like that. We kind of sat in silence for 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Waited for the first mixes to come back from John, because he mixes all his own records, and everyone loved Moonshot, like so.
You mentioned just a second ago it kind of was like splashes of colour and noise, and you've mentioned the overarching sort of palette of this record is splashes of colour is what I read that you said. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what that means sonically?
Did I say that?
I've read you. But if you haven't said that, you just said it 2 minutes ago about the first track.
Yes, true. I know it is there. I think maybe, now that you say that, like maybe Can't Pretend to Know as well as another track kind of has that. I wouldn't really see it as like an overarching kind of theme throughout it, but there's definitely a couple of songs on there that have that, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the kind of language that we kind of developed within our sound on the second record, you know.
Yeah.
It's very much about that. Very much about textures, you know. Conversely, this record was just so much more about the substance of the tune, the spirit of the song itself, you know, and the textures and all that stuff. Kind of faded into insignificance until, you know, what I think anyway to be for Blindness was the right time was just like in the studio, you know, where we added those little flecks, you know.
Yeah. What drove you to go with Can't Pretend to Know as the lead single from the record of all the tracks?
It was just like one of the more like instant tunes, maybe. And yeah, it just felt so exciting. It felt like a long time since we had released music, so we just wanted to like breathe life into ourselves again. But I don't think it was like overly analyzed either, because like there's so much like volatility to the record. There's so much urgency to the record that we probably could have picked like a few different ones as well, you know.
Yeah. And just going back a step as well, with Blindness as a name for the whole LP as a total, what is the sort of the message behind that? Because they can kind of weave it through certain lyrics that go throughout the album, be it sort of a sense of self-identity or maybe a societal piece of commentary. But what does it mean to you as the band, the artist?
Yeah, this was the first record we didn't have a title for while recording it. So that was kind of interesting, you know. I kind of came away looking at these tunes and wondering what was the binding sort of agent between them, you know. And there was like all these, you know, I started to like narrow it down, which didn't really actually help. Do you remember? I was like, well, you know, I kind of went away for a couple of weeks, like really just like sifted through it, sat with it for a bit, and I went back to the lads and I was like, well, as far as I can see anyway, it's about love, you know, which is, you know, could talk about that. And then it's also maybe, you know, there's elements of like introspection in there, you know, which is sort of always kind of in our records, I think. And then it's also, you know, like themes about nationalist ideologies and distorted patriotism. And at that point, you were kind of like, right, yeah. And there's like, what are we going to call this? You know, like it just started to veer off into all these places. And there's sort of like more than ever on our work, there's a sense of Irishness being explored, like exploring our own relationship to Ireland, the Ireland we grew up in, like the hangover of our parents' Ireland and the Catholic Church. So there's all these things, and like after a while started to realize that what brought these things together was this sort of limited perspective of like the human experience, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
And just how much we can miss, you know, and that was in the elements or the themes of love, like in the relationships that I was exploring, you know, On a Distant Life, Words Lost Meaning, Swallow, Trading Wing.
Yeah.
And the same went for songs like Love a Country, exploring that kind of distortion of patriotism and the conflation of patriotism and nationalism and the fear that we all live in today of those, of the kind of rise of hatred and vitriol as a blanket sort of way of looking at it. They were all there, you know. It was all just kind of this blindness that we all do live in, like, you know.
Yeah. But the reason why I ask is I think it's an amazing album title because of the lyrics in the record. And there's a couple that stand out. And, in Love of Country, for example, you just mentioned, there's a really powerful lyric, which is, "Can you blame me for mistaking your love of country, the hate of man?" which I think is such a direct piece of commentary. But there's also mentions of introspection with plastic figurine, and I think all of these different sort of images you conjured up did speak to a wider sense of human blindness, I guess. Is that something you feel quite proud of now, looking back at the record? Not to
But I'm not good at saying stuff like that. I haven't heard of them.
Yeah, I think it's important to address that lyrically is a brilliant album, and there's some amazing lines in it.
I can definitely speak on that because like it wasn't me who wrote the lyrics, and like when I'm sitting across the room and James is coming up with this, it is like mind blowing, like, and like so invigorating. Like James like read out to us we were kind of, it kind of comes to a point with songs where we like kind of make a decision, like, is the passion there to continue it? And as we were writing Love of Country, we like it happens that we were in Dublin and we were all like really focused in on our parts, and we were just like, all right, well, like, what is this song? Like, does it have a meaning? Should we finish it, essentially? And James has read the poem of Love of Country from start to finish, and like him saying that on its own would be good enough to put to record. So we were like, let's definitely fucking make this tune. And yeah, like that line, could you blame me for mistaking your little country for hate of man? Just like, for me, anyways, completely sums up what is so rife in Ireland and so rife in the world at the minute, that people are way more like the far right, and like people with like really intense nationalist ideologies are way more willing to die for a flag than to live in a country with people from another country. And like anti-immigration has like real life violent consequences at the minute. And yeah, like it felt important for us as artists to comment on some of the things that are happening in the world at the minute, but you know, the thing that we know how to do best is music. So like that's why it's there more so than anything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, the lyrics are fucking amazing.
Does it feel doubly as important? And please feel free to correct me on how I word this, but does it feel doubly as important as an Irish artist? Because from the outside looking in, it's quite easy to say that Ireland is having such a amazing moment in the arts, be it, you know, unfillable with music. There's such a massive breadth of brilliant art coming out of the country. But in many ways, the stuff you're talking about in some of these songs, it could be easy to sort of use that as papering over the cracks of some of the problems that still exist within Irish society. Is that so? As an Irish artist, do you feel there's a responsibility to keep trying to convey the truth as much as you can?
Only if you have something to say.
Yeah,
I would say I don't feel like, and I mean that within the music, you know. I think as human beings, you know, first and foremost, before any sort of label of artists or whatever, you know, how could you not feel fear or compassion for people who are marginalized or people who are brutalized? And how could that not be at the forefront of your, you know, of your everyday now, you know? But as artists, as Irish artists, yeah, maybe there's some sort of innate, you know, as a nation who was colonized and oppressed, like, you know, I guess, well, I don't guess, but it's a part of our DNA, you know, and it's a part of our history and stories, and yeah, storytelling is really, in a way, what kind of all art is doing on some level, and it's those stories that kind of keep history, you know, at the foreground, which is where it needs to be, you know, so that we don't see the repetition of these kind of horrible things, you know.
Yeah, sure.
Is the main? Sorry, I just want to get to the kernel of that question.
Well, I'm glad you asked, because I said I think where it comes from is, I think as a music fan, I've found some of the, I guess, the discourse around Irish art a little bit reductive, that there's just this unknown sort of influx of amazing music and film coming out of Ireland, but it comes from a place which a rich history of, you know, art comes from trouble most of the time. And that's, I think sometimes in the conversations about how brilliant music coming out of Ireland is at the minute, people forget, you know, where it's come from. Would that be a fair comment?
Yeah, I think so. I'd also wonder, was there a time where there wasn't good art coming out of Ireland? That would be my question. Like,
yes,
you know, I suppose it probably always is in some way, you know. Whether or not it's like having global success, I think is kind of neither here nor there.
Yeah.
You know, that's just...
I think that speaks to my point.
Yeah, it's trend and popularity. You know? Yeah, it's like, I don't know. Someone asked me that recently. Like, you know, why now? Like, why you, mentioning a bunch of our, like, our mates and contemporaries, like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's not me saying that it is now, though. That's me saying...
That's what they're saying, yeah.
Yeah, there's this kind of... There's this sort of narrative around it like that, and I think... I often wonder if it's frustrating as an Irish artist.
Well, you know, yeah, I mean, either, yeah, I'm just trying to...
Don't feel like
I'm just trying to think about what it is like, you know, maybe that's not the worst of it, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, the classic one is like the British media claiming you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's frustrating.
Yeah, that's because that's just sort of... that's stupidity, isn't it? Right?
Well, yeah, it's just, I don't know. Sometimes you wonder, you know, especially when they do it to like major sports stars and stuff like that, you wonder, it's like, yeah, what's the agenda there? Yeah.
And then, you know, speaking of Irish artists, Shane MacGowan played a big part in one particular tune, Death of a Giant, right? And his passing at that time came when... Were you writing it at that time, or did it come from immediately after that happened?
We, few of us went to his funeral procession. It was during that same writing trip in Dublin at the end of 2023. Is that right? I hope that's right. 2024 now, yeah. And we were in Dublin anyway, so we went to the procession on Fear Street, and, you know, just to pay our respects and sort of be there and be in that moment with the community, and it was amazing, you know. I think as Irish people, and Gabe will be able to extrapolate on this with great detail. We have a very beautiful and close relationship with death, and that was very much felt that day. He's sort of this incredible carriage was being drawn down the street by these like huge, majestic black horses, and they had these feathers coming out of their heads, and like this young kids in a marching band walking up the street, and the streets are obviously lined either side, and they're singing Pokes tunes, and you know, there's a picture of Shane on the side of the carriage, and there was a sort of obviously a solemnness in the air and a feeling of sadness, but excuse me, more so than that, a feeling of celebration, you know, which I think is what we do well. We celebrate a life more than we mourn a death, you know. Maybe we lose that balance sometimes, but I think it's a good thing. And yeah, I just kind of came away from that. And at the end of that, there's a beautiful chemist at the top of Pier Street, and there was a fella singing Pokes tunes outside of there, and it was just amazing, you know. Didn't think about writing a song about it or anything, just felt it. And then we went back to the studio working on that tune, and needed some lyrics. So yeah, it's a very documentary style, you know. That's kind of a first, I think, for our work anyway.
Yeah, I really like that way of describing it. Yeah, because last year, 2023 felt like a big year of like losing Irish artists, because Sinead O'Connor died in the same year. And we had actually asked Sinead to come on with us at Glastonbury that year before she died. And like her management sent like a really lovely email back and stuff, but then when news came that she had passed, like it just like the weight of it just like hit even harder. But yeah, like on from the thing we were talking about a wee minute ago about like the responsibility of being an Irish artist, that year definitely felt that way, and especially when we just had finished Another Voices in Dingle and went straight into that writing trip. It was actually in like the Irish Rock and Roll Museum that we were writing in Temple Bar. So like we were, literally surrounded by the history of what it is to be an Irish artist. But yeah, that tune sort of encapsulates that. But the beautiful thing about that song, I was thinking as well, like on from like what it's directly about, I think you can, any big person that passes away in your life is kind of a giant to you in a way, you know, like because of the impact that they've had on you. So I like that song can be sort of transferable to whoever it is. Do you know what I mean? Where like our first record was so introspective on grief and like you couldn't see the wood from the trees, whereas Death of a Giant is like a really concise but powerful and like strengthening song around grief, I think.
So grief is one of many sort of subject matters in the old album, and as you mentioned, another one is love. And in the final track,
Can I just add to that before you go on?
of course,
Sorry, I just wanted to say that just when Gabe said there about, you know, people in your lives who pass away, they sort of, you know, they're a giant in the sense of how they affected you. And I think I'd be remiss not to mention that I think one of the reasons why Shane MacGowan's effect on the world was so huge was not just his sort of, you know, abilities as a writer, not just those things, but it's his vulnerability, you know. And I think that's what makes people superhuman, really, is the people who are actually able to expose their vulnerabilities to the world, you know, make people feel a little bit more normal, you know. Like he was such a great romantic, you know, and obviously incredibly talented, but that word also just feels a bit flippant. It's sort of like he obviously through his like personal struggles, very public personal struggles with alcoholism, remained this kind of vulnerable artist, you know, who sort of had his finger on the pulse of humanity, you know, more accurately than most artists ever hoped to, you know, I would say.
do you, as a band and personally as a lyricist, do you find yourself, when you kind of reach a similar level of vulnerability in your songs, do you find yourself, because what you're talking about there is someone who's so, on such a level of talent, as you say, that the vulnerability sort of comes naturally. Do you ever find yourself being like, wow, I'm really letting myself, opening myself up here, but I've got to do it, you know, to pursue the art?
Yeah. Well, it's usually, I find that's when I'm spending more time hanging out down cafes and pubs because I just don't want to write, you know.
Yeah. And so coming back to the final track and that feelings of love, there's some quite interesting sort of discussions around what the word love means in the modern context. Could you explain that a little bit more in relation to that track?
I'm trading a wing.
Yeah. There's talk about you know, love being used as a word, as sort of a sign off more than
Oh, that's words lost meaning.
okay.
Yeah, that's all good, man. Yeah, so words lost meaning is kind of one of those ones where when you're in a relationship and you're on tour, you know, the relationship becomes very magnified. And so even down to the like, and you're trying to keep I think we can all in some ways relate to this. You know, you're trying to keep this connection going through a phone to someone that you love, and like whether that's over short periods of time or long periods of time, I think we can all become a bit like, you know, dissociated from what that connection really is, you know. And the kind of experience that I was having anyway was like, it just felt like I love you is starting to be used as a sort of a flippant kind of thing. Like a kind of gotta go. You know what I mean? Like, I'm in the club, you're in the hotel, gotta go, or whatever. Like, I'm in the, or whatever. Like, maybe I'm out and my partner's like, I don't know, wherever, you know, whatever. But we both started kind of losing that sense of meaning, I think, you know. And it's a difficult balance if you want to, we all want to be connected to the people we love, you know. But, you know, trying to do that through like WhatsApp or whatever, you know. Sometimes like the more messages you send, the greater the distance grows between you. You know what I mean? You just don't, you can't see it.
Yeah.
You can feel it, like, you know.
Yeah. And then so it kind of feels more sentimental to put it into a form of music, which probably is a less direct form of communication.
Yeah, I mean, I think on some level, all of our girlfriends love that we just keep airing out our arguments over records.
And then going even further and talking about it in an interview.
And then naming them to camera at night. Then.
So, you know, just to wrap up now, guys, but like, it's a really phenomenal piece of work. I'm sure you're excited to get out there and play it live, but is there a particular track that you look at from its genesis in the rehearsal space of the studio to now that your relationship with it has kind of changed, or you see it in a different way? Where are they guys? These people crept up when you won.
I honestly, what happened?
Nothing's changed for you.
Nothing's. Yeah, it's just all fucking fantastic. Like I would like.
He's still in that bubble. Give it a year.
I listened to it on the plane the last day, and I was like, I think this is one of the best rock records ever made. Like, and that is actually how I feel about it. And that is sort of not in like.
Don't let it distract you.
No,
I know what you're saying.
This sounds like ridiculous.
Yet you have to believe you're in the best band to keep going as a band. There's no other way to do it. Yeah.
It sounds ridiculous after what I just said, but like not in like a self-gratifying way. But I was just like, I don't know. The reason that I make music and I think we make music is like to hear something that we haven't heard before, and to hear something that maybe relates to who we are in a deeper and more accurate way than other music, because that's what music is for me, is like that connection to myself, or someone may say something in a way that makes you understand yourself even better. You're like, that's how I feel. And that is the beauty of being an artist or a musician, is that you can actually make that. You can make something that you can identify with. And it's like hearing James's lyrics in Love of the Country or any of the other songs on the record. It's like we get to hear that for the first time as well, you know. So yeah, no, I'm as excited about it now as I was when we made it.
Feels like a good place to finish. Right, finish. But we're looking forward to the album coming out and people hearing it, and moreover seeing how you sort of translate it to a live show. But it's a great record, so congratulations. Glad to see it, man.
Thanks, sir.